The other day, I was in my front yard, and I had brought my grandson Isaiah out there with me. We were inside, and so often as it is with young children, he said, "Can we go outside, Papa? Can we go outside and play catch?" And so I got the ball and I got the gloves, and we went outside. Now bear in mind, he's only 4 years old. And so when we went out to the front yard, I put the glove on his hand, I put the glove on my hand, and I took the ball in my hand and stepped off a couple of paces where I knew we had enough separation in between us. And he stood at the other side with the glove up in the air and a grin on his face. And he said, "Throw me the ball, Papa. Throw me the ball." And so I threw him an underhanded toss at first, of course. And the ball was going right for his glove. And somehow it went right past him. It went right past his glove and right over his shoulder. And it went rolling and rolling as it went past him. And with all the excitement that he had when he drew me out there to go play catch, he turns and he runs for that ball just as fast as he can. And he picks it up. And he runs back to that spot and holds up his hand and his glove. And he threw the ball back to me. And of course, he threw it wild. And it went over my glove, and I did the best I could, and I jumped and I caught it. And he smiled so much. And I went back to the site and underhand tossed it again. And I did the best I could to try to get it right in his glove. And for some reason, it went past him, and he had to run after it again. And he grabs it and he throws it back to me. And we did this for a while. And then he looks at me and he says, "Papa, isn't playing catch so much fun?" Now, I could have treated him like any adult and said, "Well, Isaiah, we're really not playing catch. I mean, I'm throwing the ball and somehow you're missing it every time. And I don't know why that is, but you have to keep running after it. And that's really not catch." Or I could have said, "That's great, but when you throw it to me, you're throwing wild, and I'm having to jump all over the place and try to catch this ball, and it just doesn't seem fun for me. You're really going to have to go back and practice this thing and try to work it out before you come back and play catch with me. You got to get better at this. You got to do better before you come back and do this. This isn't catch at all. This is more like me throwing, you chasing, you throwing wild, and me catching somehow." I could have said all that. But do you think I did? When he looked at me and he said, "Papa, isn't it fun playing catch?" My answer was, "It sure is, buddy. I'm having a great time." Because I loved him. And because I love him, it allows me to overlook the things that he might be doing wrong. This is the second part of the series. And this missional focus is actually the next generation that I want to talk to you about. The next generation in our gathering. My expectations for my grandson Isaiah didn't stem from his ability. I didn't love him because he was a good catcher. I wasn't amazed by his ability. He is 4 years old. We were playing catch regardless. And my relationship with him stems out of my love for him. And because I love him, I see everything he does as being amazing. I want you to think about that when we talk about the next generation in our teaching. Because for all of us, we are a next generation for God as the creator of everything. God designed us for no other reason than to love us. Now think about that for a minute. When he designed man and woman and he put them in the garden, he wasn't thinking, well, thank goodness I got these guys to help me get through fill in the blank. Thank goodness Adam's here taking care of the animals, because the animals were so hard for me to take care of as God. That's not true. Thank God we have Eve here to make sure that the crops are managed here in the Garden of Eden, because that is a real burden to me. And that's not true. There's nothing that God can't do himself. And if that's the case, why in the world did he make us at all? Why in the world did he feel that it was important to have someone bearing his image? Why was it important for him to have a generation of sorts that followed him? It had to be for some reason, and when you look through all of Scripture, the only reason that I can find is that he loves us. He loves us. He loves you. And that's why you were created. And so, as believers, isn't it our responsibility to pass that love on to the next generations? Is not that our kingdom legacy? Isn't that what we were created for? God treated Adam and Eve in a special way when they were in the garden. He would come and walk with them. He would come and spend time with them. He taught them. He asked them what they were supposed to do. He dwelt among them. You see, God himself, who's the creator, treated this generation below him as though they were something special. And so if that's the image that God gives us, shouldn't we then take that image and do the same thing for the next generation? Isn't that our responsibility? Isn't that something that God gave us? God spent a lot of time telling Adam what he needed to do when he was in the garden. And so isn't it our responsibility with the next generation to teach them? Not necessarily just to tell them what to do, but to teach them the things that we did, the mistakes that we made, which means, yes, being honest. And then guiding them and letting them go into God's kingdom to do what he wanted them to do. I want to talk a little bit about generations from the biblical perspective. And I want to use the two children of Adam and Eve. Now remember, they had Cain and Abel, but Cain killed Abel. And so the next generation would have been Seth. And so I want to talk about what the book of Genesis says about Cain and Seth, and Cain's descendants and Seth's descendants. In Genesis chapter 4, we begin to see what happens with the descendants of both of these two brothers. In chapter 4, verse 17, we see that a city was built by Cain and his family to the east of Eden. This is significant because as we go on in chapter 4, we start to see the things that Cain's family introduced into the world. They were an industrious family. Remember, Cain is the sinful one. He is the one who struck down his brother Abel, killed his brother Abel. Seth is the one that was born to Adam and Eve afterwards, kind of the replacement in God's eyes for Abel. In Genesis 4, verse 19, we see that Cain's family started polygamy. They began the practice of marrying more than one wife, which, as we see, occurs all throughout the biblical narrative, especially in the Old Testament. But each and every time, it displeases God. Begun by Cain's family. In chapter 4, verse 20, we see that they are tent dwellers, and they begin to raise livestock. So Cain's family starts farming, in a sense. They begin to raise livestock for a living. And in chapter 4, verse 21, we see that Cain's family is the first to develop music. And in 4:22, it says they are the forger of tools from bronze and iron. What's interesting, when we get into this chapter and we read the difference between Cain and Seth, is that we see that not a single cultural advancement is applied to Seth and his descendants. All of the cultural advancements are on Cain's side of the family. Now, I'm not saying that that's bad. For those of you that like music like I do, it would be wrong of me to say that music is sinful. But I want to talk to you about why there's a difference between Cain's family and Seth's family. It doesn't necessarily have to do with what they created. It has a lot to do with how they created it. Let's go on to chapter 10 in the book of Genesis, and we see the story of Noah. As Noah and the ark rest on top of the mountain and everything starts to settle down, Noah's son Ham is cursed. Now, it's out of Ham's line that we see Nimrod. I know it's a funny name, but Nimrod was a mighty hunter in the Old Testament. He comes out of that, and so hunting is developed out of this same family, out of Cain's family. The descendant of Cain is Ham, and out of Ham comes Nimrod, and Nimrod is a mighty hunter. Babel, the town of Babel, the city of Babel, you've heard of the Tower of Babel, comes out of this. Babel is the root of the word Babylon. And so this was the tower that the people tried to build so that they could reach God, not necessarily just to see God, but so they could be on equal level with God. They were trying to find equality with God. Nineveh and Sodom also came out of the line of Cain. Noah's other two sons don't have any cultural advances ascribed to their family at all. Now, if we go even further into the Bible, in Judges chapter 1, verse 19, we say the natives of Canaan are in the hands of the Israelites in a battle, and they have chariots made of iron. But Israel did not have the chariots made of iron. Those that had the chariots made of iron came from the family of Cain. The Israelites did not. In 1 Samuel 15:19, the Philistines owned all of the technologies of war, descendants of the family of Cain. You probably wonder where I'm going with all of this. Cain's family followed the path of worldly glory. Genesis 5, when we go back to that, shows us what exactly came out of Seth's family. There's no technology that's ascribed to them at all. Only life and worship and family. Seth's family simply worshiped God. And that's what the Bible says. People are the true important product of culture. People are the true important product of culture. Particularly people who know and love God. That is what is produced from the line of Seth. People who know and love God. Jesus is a descendant of Seth. So what are we teaching our kids? Nothing wrong with music. Nothing wrong with tools made out of bronze and iron. Nothing wrong with some of the things that came out of Cain's family. Of course, some of the things that did come out, yes, there are problems with that. I'm not saying that technology is bad. What I am saying is that Cain's family followed what made them look important in the world's eyes, while Seth's family followed what made them look important or be important in God's eyes. That's the difference. That's the generational difference between the children of Adam and Eve. It's more important to be successful in the eyes of God than successful in the eyes of the world. So I guess what I would ask us is, what are we doing in order to be the example for the young people at Quest and in our lives and in this world? What does the next generation mean to us? When we throw the ball, are we more interested in the fact that they can catch it? Or are we more interested in the fact that we are in communion with them and having a moment and loving them and raising them up and making them feel important. A long time ago, I was a youth leader. And there was a youth in my youth group that had such difficulty with anger issues. I never knew what to do with him. It seemed like I was never, ever reaching him at all. And so I went on doing what I could do. Talking to him, being nice to him, giving him advice, and just basically doing what a youth leader does and try to hold a group together and do the best I can. About 10 years later, after that youth group, this young man came up to me and said, "You remember when you taught that lesson on such and such?" And of course, I couldn't remember it. It was just like any other of 1,000 lessons that I had taught. He said, "That lesson meant so much to me. I was being picked on at school because I was bigger than everybody else. And so it made me so angry. It made me want to lash out at them. But when I remembered what you taught me that day, I held back my anger, and I didn't do what I wanted to do. And it changed my life." I don't even remember that lesson. I remember him. And somehow God changed his life from that. And so I say, just be faithful. Listen to the Spirit. Be concerned about the next generation. Make an investment in them. We in the kingdom are not about being like Cain's family. We can play good music. We can build great things. We can do all of those things, but if we do them because the same reason that Cain did them, we'll be lost on God. Pour yourself out on this next generation. It's really important because someone poured themselves into you.